Good evening. I'm calling to order the meeting of the Pittsboro Board of Commissioners for Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, I did that.
The 26th of November.
I don't know. Okay, holiday.
2008. And as we usually do, thank you. I would like to welcome back Commissioner Jay Farrell,
Thank you.
who has been lollygagging around at home, and we've missed you to lead our Pledge of Allegiance, and so would you do so for
Certainly,
us?
my pleasure. Thank you. Would everyone rise? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd also here at the beginning like to recognize Chloe Orahadu, thank you. She is the reporter with the Our Chatham group, which you may or may not have come across. But if you are interested, Our Chatham has a listserv sign-up, and there are all kinds of nuggets about what's happening around Chatham County, and you can submit questions, as I did last week, and Chloe was pleased to have a question. So let's keep her well informed as we go forward with the town system. Is there a motion on the main agenda? Are there any changes, modifications, additions? Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by Pamela Baldwin, seconded by Bette Wilson Foley. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. As to the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, which consists of 2 items, minutes, and financial reporting as of October 31st?
So moved.
I'll second with one modification to the minutes. The minutes indicated that we were having a work session on the UDO on December 10th, and that is December 6th. And I think council made that change, so incorporating that
What time
change.
is that? 6 o'clock.
6, we said. 6 o'clock on the 6th. With that modification, is that acceptable to the maker of the motion, Bette Wilson Foley? Okay. Is there a second to Bette?
Second.
Seconded by Jake Farrell. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. There are 2 people signed up to speak this evening on public expression matters, and the first one is Carolyn Townsend from Lockwood Street. Carolyn?
Thank you. I am Carolyn Townsend. I live at 36 Walksville Street. That is one street back from 15501, probably within a quarter of a mile or less of the flooding that takes place with the confluence of Little Creek and Robinson Creek. There is a terrific amount of flooding that happens there. It's flooded, 3 or 4 times in the last 10 years. And I think this last flooding event, I think you all have tried to take care of that. You've had an engineer take a look at the repair that's required to get Pittsboro Elementary School past. I'm not sure that's going to take care of the problem, because Robinson Creek is a bigger creek of water, and there's more water that backs up the Little Creek, merges with Robinson, and that's what causes all the backup, and it's causing thousands of dollars in repairs to my neighbors across the street and down the street and next to the service station up there. They've already done some repairs. flood insurance will take care of only a little bit. It doesn't take care of furniture or anything like that. But my question is, and my concern is, has anyone walked Robinson Creek east? I did that today, and I took photos. And what the situation seems to be is that debris, just plain old debris, in the creek bed, plus timbers and trees that have fallen down. They're in the creek bed. And because of that, the water just it'll flow, but it backs up because it has no place to go. And so we live at the end of Lockville Street that abuts to Robinson Creek. It doesn't come up to our places, we're too high. But those houses were built when they were allowed to be built in the floodplain. And so thankfully, I think you all are trying to look at zoning. But I want to express that. And Al, my husband is Al Capehart. Do you have anything to add, Al?
Thank you, Carolyn. The flooding, past 3 years, the folks across the street have been flooded out twice.
Right.
When I moved here in 96, the little manhole cover across the street was up about 2 feet. Since then, somebody's come in and raised it up 6 feet, so flood water will not get into the sewer. So somebody knows what the problem is. Now, I don't know about the design for the bridge, but one thing I would like to say, with the bridge out, our neighborhood is so quiet. Even the kids who ordinarily just ride up and down on one street have now kind of taken on the bottom of the neighborhood. Is called Johnson Heights, by the way. Yeah. So just please, the confluence seems to be where the problem is, in the sense that having water get under 15501. I don't know if the DOT has looked at what their situation is as regards to the bridge and what that means. But
We have a planner here. Yes, we have a planner. Yeah. So I might come talk to you.
well,
Yeah, and our engineer, who I know has looked at Hill Creek, I'm not familiar with the terminology of Little Creek. I thought that was Hill Creek.
Oh, well, I might be, we've always called it Little Creek. It's right there at the service station. That's where that bridge is.
Yeah, Hill Creek.
Okay, it's called Hill Creek?
Well, I was thinking that was the same creek that came down past the Episcopal Church.
It probably is.
And
yes.
And there's been some issues there, and Elizabeth has met with them, and so we're keeping an eye on that. So let us take a closer look at that, and thank you so much for bringing
You're
it
welcome.
to our attention.
You're welcome.
and thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for speaking for your neighbors.
Yes. And the other person signed up tonight is Wayne Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and fellow commissioners. My name is Wayne Britt. I reside at 151 Prince Creek in Pittsburgh, and I think I'm right in the middle of the Chatham Park development. First of all, even though I go out daily and see the red ant hills and the ants having used life preservers, I want to commend Chatham Park and their contractors for the environmental safety aspects they've been doing. About twice a week, I have horses. I ride all their developments, and I look at the retention ponds, I look at the soil and erosion, and I think everything meets or exceeds the state, along with Chatham County's proposed ordinances and so forth. So, as a concerned citizens, we should commend Chatham Park and their subcontractors for the environmental protection impact that they have in the Chatham County area. Now, one other thing I wanted to address. I read Facebook every day, By the way, I was a former town board member for the town of Garner. I served on the planning board. I served on the Board of Adjustment, and then served on the town board, and then also with Wake County Commissioners. I have an extensive background in construction. I retired, or may I say retarded, years ago, but I've kept up with what's going on up here, and particularly on Facebook the last few weeks, I've noticed everybody's demanding that Chatham Park stay 2,000 feet from Hall River. All right, if we would use this same scenario 100 years ago, mining would not even be existing. If we use this same scenario with the rules and regulations, we could not even have the new county courthouse, because that's within 2,000 feet of a running stream. So I would beg and plead with you, Ms. Mayor and the commissioners, to really look at your zoning and so forth in your future decisions and discussions on what Chatham Park represents. I'm not for development, and the only way we're going to stop that is for everybody to quit having kids or the immigration, because as long as everybody continues to have families and so forth, we're going to have population growth. So we've got to keep all these things in mind. And then again, I want to emphasize, if we use these same tokens, then one of the nicest places in North Carolina is Lake Norman. They build right on the lakes. One of the other places, Riverwalk in Wilmington, they build right on Cape Fear River. Then you've got several developments right there. They build right on the water. However, their environmental aspects keeps the water clean and so forth. And we're all concerned about our drinking water today, tomorrow, and the future. It appears to me, based on what I see from day to day and from my weekly travels, that we're all concerned about Jordan Lake. If the state would control the impurities that go into Jordan Lake north of Chatham County, then the lake would be crystal clear. It'd be like White Lake. However, those regulations and so forth have been a little lenient upstream. So we do not need to penalize a local developer in our future aspects and our growth of Chatham County. Thank you, Ms. Mayor and Commissioners.
Thank you, Weaver.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. The next item on the agenda is Commissioner and Manager updates. I usually start by talking about things that we've done, and some of them I shared with our Police Chief Percy Crutchfield and with the Town Manager Brian Grusbeck. On the 15th, all four of us, were out at Camilla Baldwin as well. We judged the STEM science projects out at Barry Harrison School, and that was so much fun. Those are the kinds of things that just make a big difference in serving in public office. That afternoon, I spoke to the Future Business Leaders of America at Margaret Pollard School, which was another very fun event. On the 16th, several of us in the community were filmed by WUNC-TV for a documentary that will air in February on the role of women in construction and areas of planning and zoning that where women have perhaps not been as often seen. On the 18th was the magnificent tree lighting. On the 19th, Brian Grusbeck and I met with members of Waste Industries, and on the 24th, even despite the bad weather, several of us wrapped other people's Christmas presents at the Shop Local event here on Hill Forest Street. So, did other members of the board have updates with either EDC or Triangle J or PDA downtown?
EDC, Main Street, PDA, not had any meetings since our last get-together here. But I can say, and I can keep quite specific, Main Street is trying to work with a group that's got a very successful festival right in downtown Pittsburgh. So working on that.
Well, and I would like to thank, was it Main Street or PDA for the handles to get up on the sidewalks in the parking area?
That is a Main Street program.
Okay.
And you'll note that 2 of the handrails have the decorative component to them, and that was a test, and we think it's a successful test. We're going to add some additional art to those, all the handrails and things like that.
Well, I should have noticed that have new hips that just really appreciate that kind of assistance.
Well, Jay had a big hand in driving for these handrails.
Good. Others? Great. Brian Grusbeck, do we have updates from you?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be efficient. You might have seen on Constant Street, Fire Tower Road, there's a collection of trees and branches and other debris, natural debris. It's been cut by Duke Energy, I think it's part of the easement clearing. We've passed along some concerns we received from residents, particularly as you're coming down Fire Tower Road and trying to turn. But it's just kind of unsightly, and it's been there for a little while longer usually than they leave it. So we're expecting that to be cleaned up soon, and we will let them know if, remind them if it's not. Recycling, Mayor Perry mentioned a meeting that we had with Bill Davidson, our contact from Waste Industries. The pricing for recycling is probably going to, the way in which Waste Industries collects and distributes the recycling from Pittsburgh is probably going to change and lead to some additional costs for us down the road. We don't know exactly what the precise numbers on that are going to be, but in talking to Mr. Davidson with Mayor Perry, it appears as if we can get some sort of stay, at least for this current fiscal year, and then look at that for an upcoming, being able to budget for that in an upcoming fiscal year if that's necessary. So we will keep you posted on that. Community House, you might notice that we are in the process of fixing some minor things in and out of the house. There was a broken window. Some of the walkways have been heaving up with tree roots. The inside could use a paint job. I'd really like to tackle the floor again, but I'm told the floor is so old that it may not be able to withstand another resurfacing. So we'll try to come up with something on that front as well. So anyway, if you hear about any construction or maintenance going on there, that's what that's all about. As a reminder, you have a workshop scheduled for December 6th, as we mentioned earlier this evening, here at Town Hall to discuss the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. On December 10th, the regular meeting, you should be receiving an audit presentation from our auditor. They're currently reviewing, and we should have everything finalized in advance of that meeting. Almost last but not least, the Christmas parade. We talked about that at the last meeting. He decided at the last meeting he did decide to ride in a float. If you have any design ideas, please let us know. Chris and I were talking about it a little bit earlier today. improving the sled from what you had, maybe some more luxurious accommodations for you. So if you have anything in mind, or if you want to help with that, let me know. And then finally, what I would also add is I was appointed to the legislative committee for Triangle J at the organization's second meeting. The first one happened while I was out of state. The main focus, or one of the main focuses that we'll be looking at, well, the primary purpose of that group, as I understand it, and Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin can jump in if I missed the intent here, but is to kind of help guide the Triangle J board, the COG board, on legislative issues and stances and so forth, vetting white papers and things of that nature. The main issue that we talked about this afternoon dealt with one of your priorities annually, and that's broadband and access to broadband. And so I think there's some interesting stuff there. I don't know that there's a magic fix out there in terms of hammering out free broadband for everyone, but I think there are some things that we can at least work on as a group, and within that group to improve our knowledge of what some of the broadband issues are for the county and the community. Because I don't think at this point in time, at least in terms of the town of Pittsburgh, it's so much an issue of not having access to broadband, but having access to good, reliable, fast broadband, modern broadband. And so that's something that we need to work on, especially as we grow. With that, I will tap out, and if you have any comments or questions, feel free to ask me now, or we can bring it up later. Council from your during board discussion.
Questions for Brian Griesbeck? Then we'll proceed to the next agenda item. There being no new business, the old business request for town support for local contributions, Chatham Parkway Road Project. Brian Griesbeck and Jeff Jones will be speaking to us tonight.
Thanks again, Madam Mayor. I'll set the table and then get out of the way. We have, as I mentioned, Jeff Jones has been working on the issue. We also have from Triangle J, Matthew Day, who's assisted us in the past. And then also to Chatham Park is here to answer any questions or ask us any questions. The table setting is as follows. You'll recall last summer, DOT and Chatham Park considered considered asking for the town support on the Chatham Parkway, which is the proposed Chatham Parkway, which is, you can see the screen, this general line, this general color line, which would be built on this side of Pittsboro as part of the comprehensive transportation plan. Chatham Parkway itself was originally not, I guess, part of the consideration for DOT as a future funded roadway. That's changed somewhat recently, and Chatham Park is offering to put forward $9 million in construction of the parkway. And this is where I risk oversimplifying the issue, but in some of this we discussed last summer. Once the parkway is constructed, then the remainder of the money unused for the parkway can then be allocated to other town purposes. And so what we wanted to discuss with you tonight is the request from DOT to request the town to consider the letter of support for the funding for the Chatham Parkway, which would not be coming out of the town's pocket, but out of Chatham Park's pocket. Chatham Park, in turn, wants, as you can see from the attached letter in your packet, Chatham Park is requesting that the remaining monies of the $4.5 million unused for that be allocated for Chatham Park purposes. So before staff contemplated writing that letter, we thought we would try to sort out some of those issues and make sure we were all on the same page with how, with what our support, what our understanding would be for that project moving forward. Again, Jeff is going to fill in some blanks and details with this, and we have others that could also help.
Yeah, let me try to fill in some of the blanks and other detail here. Brian was right. All along, the town early in the prioritization 5.0, town was gearing up to participate or to promote and to have as its primary choice to have scored was the NC 87 bypass or truck route around the downtown area. There was some discussion after we had made our determination that that was our priority, that there could be a way to score to help Chatham Parkway move up the prioritization list with support from the town, and that their participation through whatever contributions that might be, either through monies or right-of-way dedication or actual construction of that road, could go towards helping fund that project, and that project would then score better. The way I understand it works, and Matt may have to actually fill in more holes here, but whatever contribution, local contribution, let's say the town in this case, whatever contribution the town would be making, 9 million, 10 million, whatever that is, the state would allocate through this bonus allocation of half back to the jurisdiction. So if it was $9 million, it would be $4.5 million back to the town. That could be used towards other projects. Now the caveat here that we really didn't explore too much during the initial reprioritization of our projects was that $4.5 million is not a lump sum payment to the town. That is monies that's just reallocated to the next prioritization project. So there is not money that would be, there's not a check that's going to be given to the town. What we would then, if the town supports Chatham Parkway as it's currently doing and continues to do, we would, and the $4.5 million is available to us, we would then, in prioritization 6.0, we would choose a project that would be eligible for this bonus allocation money, and we would make that a priority project wherever we wanted to have that happen. Now, Chatham Park would like that $4.5 million to be within Chatham Park boundary. I think that's a difference of what we believed to be moving back in the summer when we kind of reallocated our prioritization. And Chatham Park expressed why they feel like that is, but that's how I understand it to be, is that it's not a cash sum payment. We wouldn't be given $4.5 million. That $4.5 million would just be rolled into another prioritization project of the town and the local RPOs choosing and support, and we would then, hopefully that project would then score well enough, and we would continue to be able to fund that project through some of that money.
So one of those projects might possibly be the bike lane and the project on 15501 that connects downtown to Chatham Park.
It could be, I don't know about bike lanes, but it has to be like, I think it has to be a highway project.
Widening.
We're already doing widening on 15501.
From Lawrence.
Yeah, that's already funded and that's happening.
Right. Okay.
This, I mean,
The
as
downtown vision plan also is already covered.
part of that. But the 87 project that we had as our number one priority project, that $4.5 million could go to that project. Or some other project that the town, whenever we get to prioritization 6.0, wants to prioritize their top project. I think that's what's before you is Chatham Park wants to make sure that the next prioritization includes property or roads and within Chatham Park and not elsewhere in town. And that's what made staff feel a little uncomfortable writing a letter of support.
Yeah, I have a question. On the screen there, I see the red, I can't read what the writing is there, but I assume that's Suttles Road.
Somewhere in that area.
Okay, and the blue?
That's what I would say, what's in Chatham Park's proper, including the Malott tract that was rezoned a couple of years ago.
That's what you can see for 64 now.
This
That should be about-
is all that's built today.
Right.
Yeah.
The interchange.
Right.
This is the next phase. This is all within Chatham Park's boundary, either Chatham Park or the Malott tract that they control. This leg, which is about 1.2 miles, is the remaining part that would connect us from East Street all the way out to 15501 North. This is if everything goes as planned and we continue to support the project and this project scores well enough, this $12.5 million section of Chatham Park Way would be paid for by DOT. And that does, we've been advised that if the town were to not support the project, that there could be a loss of points towards Chatham Parkway, and that Chatham Parkway may not score well enough to receive funding. We're talking about funding that's several years, almost 8 years in the future, 2026, because these projects take some time to get through the process. So it's not something that's going to be funded and built tomorrow or next year even. There's work that has to be done for that.
Jeff, when does the reallocation you've described occur?
So that's generally after construction starts, or I think it's within a 5-year window, and that may be where Matt, if he looking a little weird. Let's have Matt get to that technical question there.
Let me also
Okay, go ahead.
try to understand where we are. I thought that the project that was being requested, the town support was the entire green,
It
yellow,
is.
blue, and red.
It is. The
Okay.
Eastern Loop. When we met with DOT back in the July, August time frame, we had not talked, the whole Eastern Loop was not on the table. It was really from East Street all the way up. It was really that red piece that we were talking about. DOT, in their capacity, looked at the project, thought that it could score well enough with the whole Eastern Loop, and that they wanted to put the entire eastern half of the loop into the project. And my position was, if it continues to score well enough, why not? Let's go ahead and do that. Because we would like for the whole entire eastern loop to be complete at some point in time. And we were assured that it would score well enough and continue to do, if everything was going well, that adding that green section wouldn't be detrimental to the project. Yeah. Matt can...
Mr. Johnson,
Go ahead.
before you go to that,
No.
let me ask you this. Now, on that list, which we currently have,
Yeah.
DOT, so if there were no 4.5 million, is that, were those projects surely funded?
Oh, no.
Were they secure?
No, those other projects like NC 87, that's been a project that we've had in prioritization list for several rounds of prioritization now, and it never really scores well enough. We've kind of taken the limits of that project down to hopefully score better. It used to extend quite a distance from sort of 15501 up, and that project has been reduced down a little bit in size to help score well, but none of those projects have any funding associated with them that we have in our prioritization list.
Other than the one on 15501?
15501, that was funded, I think in two cycles in 3.0.
So basically, that won't really have an adverse effect on our list if we were to change it and add this section.
So the idea all along was that we were going to support the project. They were going to put, they being the developer, was going to put in through the town $9 million towards Chatham Parkway. The town would then be able to receive bonus allocation monies in the tune of $4.5 million to be able to apply that money to other projects in town. Any project that we wanted to. Until 2 weeks ago when Chatham Park requested that we choose their projects and not NC 87 or something else.
Jeff, are these any projects that are part of the NCDOT prioritization program?
Or that could be eligible for that program.
But not just any project we choose?
No, I think it has to be eligible.
So it would have to be an eligible project, and it has to be a project that is submitted at some point in time. So if it's a project that we have not previously submitted, then we would have to submit it in the next cycle, which will be coming up this summer.
And Matt, is that right, 5 years after construction?
Yes, so the way that this works is, we put all these projects in and DOT does their scoring, and they kind of spit out a list that says, here's when your project is, here's if your project is funded, and here's when it's funded. So hopefully by the end of 2018, we will know what projects got funded. It will have that list, and it'll have a year. It'll say, this project, Chatham Parkway project, if funded, is in, let's say, 2026. So then in 2026, what would have to happen is when they start construction on that project, that's when the money has to move. So that's when the $9 million would have to go to DOT, and that's when DOT would then make the $4.5 million available to the town within that 5 years following that date. But when I say available to the town, I'm saying available for you to program to another eligible project. It's not that you get the cash.
So in that 5-year window of time is the time frame within which to identify and submit the project, or is it the time frame within which DOT must fund the project?
I believe that would be the time frame in which you would have the money available to actually build it. So you would need to identify it and get it in the list prior to that.
And get it accepted and approved within the 5 year, but not design and build.
So let's say that at the end of next month, DOT comes back and says Chatham Parkway is funded in 2026. What y'all would have to do is figure out, first off, if you're going to put it, if you would like to put that money towards a project that is not already in the list of projects that have been submitted in the past, then you would need to submit that project in our next round, which will be coming up in summer of 2019. So that's sort of the first step. You would have to submit that project to make it eligible. Once you've kind of got it in the system, we would just need to make sure it remains in the system. And then when you get to 2026, at that point in time, that's when DOT would give you the go-ahead to spend that $4.5 million, and that's when basically the project needs to be ready to go within that 5-year period. So you might have to do environmental work and stuff ahead of time. It's going to partly come down to whether this is a locally administered project or a state administered project. If DOT is administering it, then they kind of bake all that stuff into their schedule anyway. But if it's going to be a town project, then you've got to kind of work through all those mechanics.
Okay, so in 2019, you identify a project, and you say this $4.5 million that's allocated, we want it to go towards this project.
Yeah, so basically, that $4.5 million, you get to decide what project that goes to. So it has to be something that gets submitted through DOT's scoring process, but at the end of the day, DOT's score doesn't matter if the $4.5 million is enough to pay for that project. Now, if $4.5 million is not enough to pay for that whole project, then you're going to need it to score well on DOT's process to pay for whatever the remainder is.
So it doesn't have to be so it has to be an NCDOT eligible project, i.e. be within the prioritization program.
Yep.
But if it costs less than $4.5 million, the town is free to just go spend that money on that project.
Basically, as long as we get it on the list.
Without it being scoring well and being approved.
Yep. I'm not the expert, but based on the discussion I had with the DOT STIP office today, that appears to be the case.
If that $4.5 million doesn't cover the full cost, then you're in the game to score well and be awarded the project.
Or you bring more money to the table.
Or more money to the account.
Michael, are you referring to the 87 bypass? Is that money?
Oh, I'm referring to anything at this point. I'm not anything in particular.
I mean, 87 truck
Yeah.
route. That's been something on my mind for a long time.
It has been. And
I don't think $4.5 million would even touch any kind of
I don't think it will
route around that.
I heard numbers as high as 10 million.
226.
$20 million, yeah.
And I just can't help but feel that back this past summer, that it was not our intention at all to become in a position where we were in competition with Chatham Park's road system. And so this comes as a little bit of a disappointment to me that we're perhaps going to be vying for the same pot of funds, which I didn't think was going to be the case, especially when we were there at the meeting, with the secretary at Chatham Park, when he turned to us and said, "Well, why don't we fund both projects?" Well, that sounded pretty good, and maybe too good to be true. Is it too good to be true?
I don't think Matt or I can speak for the Secretary of Transportation and or his associates that were at that meeting. I look at it not as directly as competition. These are roads that are on streets and roads that are on our thoroughfare plan, have been for a long time. I think what is the different point here is that we have a request from Chatham Park that we would, in the future, prioritize roads within their boundaries. So that $4.5 million could be used towards roads within Chatham Park boundaries. I think that's part of what Brian put in the memo, is that we could support the project, tell the DOT we're supporting the project, and work out this negotiation later, and not sort of get hung up on the details of the $4.5 million tonight. But I think what we wanted to do was make you all clearly aware of Chatham Park's intentions all along, I guess, because we thought something different. And then for Chatham Park to hear our intentions of what the bonus allocation was going to be used for. And I think that through negotiation with you all and Chatham Park, there could be a resolution to that. Matt, at any point in time, let's say the town board supports the project, but 3 months from now, things have not went well, what happens at that point?
Okay, so let's imagine this scenario. Tonight you agree that the manager can make a letter to submit to DOT that says, yes, you're supportive of this. DOT scores it on the assumption that $9 million is coming, because that feeds into DOT scoring of the project, and it gets selected for funding. 6 months from now, you say, no, this isn't working. What happens at that point is that DOT would then kick it into, they have basically, they flag it and they kick it into a process for review as to whether that change, by taking the local money out and it changes the score, was that enough of a change to require that they would then yank the funding and make it go back through prioritization again. And they have a committee that reviews those. So you always have that option to say, no, this isn't working, and we're going to pull out the $9 million, and we're going to do that. But DOT then has the option to say that's enough of a change that the Chatham Parkway project has to go back through and be rescored again. That being said, there's a good chance that just because of the way the money is tied up in most early years and the way that DOT's process works, even if it's funded, we might have to have it scored again anyway, just because of the vagaries of DOT's process. So there's a lot of unknowns at this point. I would say anytime there's what DOT calls a letter of commitment, it's not really a commitment so much as it is a letter of support, because DOT cannot hold you or future boards to fund something that you decide not to, basically.
Project we're talking about is the entire loop?
Yes.
Okay.
So the red, blue, the orange, the green,
Okay,
the whole thing.
because that's my understanding, and one of the reasons I was supportive, because that is the truck route as well. In fact, it's a better truck route than 87.
What kind of time frame would we be looking on that east, or I guess you call it south?
I'm not sure. If it got funded, I think Matt's thinking earliest 2026 for funding to be there and the construction to really start. It'll take several years.
So the way this process works, DOT is actually, they're doing their funding program for 2020 through 2029, but the first 5 years of that, most of the money is already locked up in projects that are already in the pipeline. And so really for new projects, you're looking at the second half of the program. So you're really looking at 2026 at the earliest.
And we're in prioritization 5.0 right now?
Okay.
And when does 6.0 occur?
So it is a 2-year cycle. So it will actually start this coming spring. The RPO will set up its committees to start coming up with the list of projects to submit, and the RPO will submit projects in the summer.
And the scoring will occur
The scoring will then
21?
end
of 20?
In 20, yeah.
End of 20.
Yeah.
Fall time.
Yeah.
I guess the reason why I did recommend that we at least move on some modicum of support on this is that it keeps the option open for money to come back to other projects in the plan. If the board did elect tonight to say absolutely not, we don't want to support this project in any way, shape, or form, then Matt can go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but that money then would not be reallocable.
So that is correct. So if the board were to tonight say, no, we don't want to do a letter, then basically that $4.5 million is off the board, and your project score would be revised to remove the local contribution from your score.
Well, I appreciate the complexity and I appreciate the clarity. And based on what I've heard, I think it's the best way for us to do this and probably the quickest way to get the truck route. We're out in 2026. Obviously sounds like a long time from now. It is, but 87 is not scoring better than this project.
I have one question. What, on this bypass here, on 64 East Business, what kind of loop intersection is going to be there? I know we have a lot of residential there.
Yeah, I think at the moment, it's just at-grade intersection, probably
Okay.
signalized in sometime in the future when the traffic counts warrant. I don't think it's an interchange.
Okay.
Got that one.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the thoroughfare plan shows it at grade intersection. Yeah. So that was done, 2011.
We need to update the thoroughfare plan too, so.
Sorry?
We need to update the thoroughfare
Yeah.
plan at some point in time too.
I guess I can't help but wonder how Chatham Park feels about their road being our truck route. I mean, is your road going to be built for the passage of truck traffic in the manner in which we think it's going to be required for, first of all, your building projects as well as building projects that occur because of yours, adjacent, additional projects?
Well, the whole roadway, green, yellow, blue, red, will be a 4-lane right-of-way. And it'll be built 2 lanes to start with till the traffic increases to 4 lanes. But that's what's being proposed now. I think you need the complete story here. We're not quite getting a complete story. We started on this several years ago with Bobby Lewis, Chief Administrative Officer from DOT, Secretary Trogdon. We had several meetings. They indicated to us that if the town would recommend the red section and we put in $9 million, that this would move up on the priority and become a project that could be built in the next 4 years. And so that's what we're talking about on the red section. We propose to build a blue section in different increments all along. But if we could do it all together or give the money and give the right-of-way, that it would move up in the next 4 years. The green section, they're looking at doing in the next 10 years. They said that would be funded in the next 10 years. We've been meeting with Brandon Jones numerous times. And what their proposal was, the Secretary Trogdon, we do a 3-part agreement between us, DOT, and the town. We put in the $9 million, we get back $4.5 million. But it's got to come through a municipality, either the county or the town. That's the way we understood it. That's the way I wrote my letter. That's the way Secretary Trogdon and Bobby Lewis presented it to us. I don't know where it got mixed up in the translation. We would in turn use that $4.5 million back on roads in Chatham Park, is what the Secretary told us. Somehow it got this project in competition with other projects. This project scores on its own. Other projects score on their own. The reason this project would score up top is because Chatham Park was willing to put in $9 million. Without funding, projects don't move to the top. They just stay in the middle. So DOT wants to get the most bang for their buck. So if they're going to spend $11 million and somebody else puts in $9 million, that's a pretty good bang for their buck. But we anticipated getting back 4.5 of that. If we put in the 9, they help us pay for it. So that's our understanding. Be glad to answer any questions. We're giving the right of way for the blue and the green. In turn, for the green, the state's going to spend, I think it says $21 million to build that lower section. But we got to give the right of way for that. So in turn for that, and the right of way for the yellow, and the right of way for the blue, which is, millions of dollars worth of right of way, 100 and some acres. That counts toward the project also. So it's not just the $9 million. We have to give the right of way. And the only way you can give the right of way is to give it to the town, and the town gives it to DOT. It has to be a process.
On the, this may not make any sense, on the $4.5 million back, is that used back on this bypass or this red or the blue?
No, it's going to be used, that'll be built by them. It's going to be used on other roads, state-controlled roads in Chatham Park.
And let me get that, I'm sorry. So these roads will be built before any of that money is returned?
This section will be built before the money's returned.
The blue and the red?
This will be built before 10 years is up. This is sort of separate from that.
Right.
Sort of in the same project for scoring, but this is a separate one for DOT's in this.
But
Of course,
you're
we've already
talking
built
about-
this. We spent $26.5 million for this already. So this right away, we got to give to the town. At the same time, the map transfers to DOT. We get back half of the funding for that right of way. Same as we're doing up here. So there's sort of multiple transactions we worked out with DOTs to take care of this. But for the scoring project, we're looking at the $9 million. There's a lot of things going on here. The biggest part is the $21 million. The state's going to pay for that. I mean, that's.
But you wouldn't be using the $4,500,000 back on that particular project. It would be
No,
used for
it'll be
other
used for
roads.
other state roads within Chatham Park. Maybe down here on the southern section, maybe in the northern section. We've been working on this for years. I think there's some confusion because of the other project, or 87 or something. I don't know anything about that. This is this project.
I'd step in and say that the confusion is staff is applying the rules of the state. And what has been worked out between Chatham Park and the state is not normal. And we are...
Yes, it is normal, too. We've worked it out before in the past. I don't go there.
We have
worked it out.
We have our representative from Triangle J here, who is advising us of the rules and procedures of normal scoring of STI. That's normal. I'm sorry that there's a disconnect. I think there needs to be more deliberation on this.
When we talk about in the future that Chatham Park and Old Pittsburgh will be the same town, so it seems odd that that money would only be allowed to be spent on Chatham Park if there's a need. There may be some projects that will help bring Chatham Park and Old Pittsburgh together, but to say that that money can only be exclusively used in Chatham Park is creating a division between Chatham Park and Pittsburgh when it's supposed to be.
I could see that if that was the town's money. This is $9 million being put up by Chatham Park. DOT said we would return that 4.5 of that back to you to spend on other roads that you would normally have to pay for.
And they told us that
the
it
$9
would
million
be to the town.
In essence, the $9 million is only costing us $4.5 million. That's what they told us.
And they told us something different. They told us that Brandon Jones in this meeting on July 20th said that the $4.5 million would go back to the town for the North Carolina 87 project. That's what he said in this meeting.
It sounds like we need more clarification.
Never heard that. I've never.
It was said in this meeting.
That's separate.
I've never heard that.
So that's what we believe as staff. I believe the mayor was at that meeting. I believe Commissioner Keoka was at that meeting. That was our belief. That's why we've changed our prioritization. That's why we jumped through the hoops for many meetings that we had to do that. This was to help fund a priority project elsewhere in town.
That was certainly my understanding. And then
Right.
at the final meeting at which the prioritizations occurred was, I was out of the country and was greatly concerned about my understanding. So I said it confirmed it again that was what we were
Right.
that was what we were talking about. That we'd throw our support for the CPI project if they would throw their support for the Highway 87 project. Now, I completely agree that, in a sense, the completion of 15501 to 15501, the eastern loop there, in a sense, would be a much better project. Truck route. But I also question, I mean, I don't know that we know about the rumbling trucks passing by the residences of Chatham Park or not. I mean, I've already heard plenty of complaints about the idea of traffic, truck traffic increasing on 87. Nobody wants trucks rolling past them, and neither do those of us that live on Hillsborough Street. But we all face the idea that there need to be some alternatives about the truck traffic, and there needs to be a consideration of the fact that there may be even more intense development in the southern part if the mega site ends up creating some sort of additional traffic as well. So I agree that that was what our understanding was.
And just thinking about the types of roads we are talking about, obviously Hillsborough Street is long past something we would consider a highway. Yet it's a highway. I mean, we don't appreciate it. We have 35 mile per hour speed limit, which is probably too fast in our residential area. 87 has got a lot of residences, a lot of driveways on it, and the terrain in there is pretty challenging. And again, it is just 2 lanes. This facility that we're talking about has been identified since 2011 in a thoroughfare plan as a 4-lane divided highway. I don't know if it was a highway, it was a boulevard perhaps, but the speed limit's like 45 to 55 there, depending upon how much access you have on that roadway. So it is by far the superior choice for a truck route or a bypass, if you will. And honestly, once it is a DOT road, it's a DOT maintained road, and they control access to it, and they control everything about it. And if you want to do something to it, whether you're Chatham Park or Pittsboro or both, you got to talk to DOT and get permission to do it. So this is a better solution.
But it's not going to be a 4-lane highway.
It will be a 2-lane until what I heard is traffic warrants making it a 4-lane.
But the question I have is, until traffic warrants, and the question is, is it going to be a 4-lane that has a lot of stoplights every few, or is it going to be what you think of as a true truck route that has good clearance? You just drive through, there's not a lot of stoplights. It seems that this is going to develop. There's going to be, the truck's going to use it because there's going to be a lot of stoplights probably.
Well, I think there are stoplights associated with that roadway, but the 2 lanes, again, will be a median divided. So it's going to be a completely different feel to the roadways. And given 87, which is a narrow roadway with narrow lanes, and or going through the middle of town at 35 and 20 miles per hour, I think truckers are going to clearly take a 45 to 55 mile per hour, even if they've got a couple of stop signs or stop lights along the way.
Well, we would suggest, sort of like it was talked about before, the reason we're here tonight is because DOT needs a letter from the town that says they support this project, and that if we put in $9 million, they could move it up the ladder, and I think it will score so that we can do it. We can argue about the $4.5 million later. We need to get this letter to DOT by the 30th so that they can score it well. I recommend we have another meeting with Secretary of Transportation and Bobby Lewis and just get exactly what they meant. But to get this on the scoring, could I suggest we just move it forward and delay talking about $4.5 million for 4 or 5 years or whatever? I mean, it's going to take that long to get this done. This does not affect the scoring on any other projects. Every project scores on its own, right? So no matter how 87 scored, this doesn't affect any other project on the scoring list, right?
But if we had $4.5 million to put towards the 87 project, the 87 project would score better. Is that not correct?
So what would actually happen in that case is you're basically just putting you're programming that project independently of the scoring. So let's say that you identify some improvements you can do on 87 to $4.5 million. You know, I know we heard earlier you think it's more like $10 million for the whole thing, but maybe you can do half of it for $4.5. and you could just program that project, and the score doesn't matter, because you have that $4.5 million to actually take what you're going to spend it on.
Could I interject something?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
And might I add that
I was on the score with DOT.
No, sir, I'm sorry. We're having a discussion that does not, there's no need for you to interrupt. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
unless I'm missing something, the $4.5 million doesn't exist unless $9 million goes in.
That's correct.
So what I'm thinking is that we could do a letter of support, but basically, in terms of identifying the 4.5 million, maybe that we should do that later and get additional clarification, because we're hearing several different issues, several different responses from DOT, and I know DOT will change. They will change in no time. They will say they're going to do this, and then they're going to do something else. So I've seen them do that on several occasions. So we need clarification from DOT, specifically what they're talking about.
And I will say the letter that needs to be in by the end of this week does not have to say how you would spend the $4.5 million. It just needs to say that you're going to provide the $9 million.
And at the time I put the memo together, that's exactly the same conclusion I came to. Like, that's what has to be done is we have to make some expression of support for this, or we lose the $4.5 million. We have time to figure out the $4.5 million. So that's where I'm at with it.
I will make a motion to approve the letter of support.
Moved by Michael Fielder, seconded by Bill McFarland. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Chatham Park Master Plan text amendment for the additional element of facilities.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. We've been at this for quite some time now, and we've received the latest draft that's included in your packet on Tuesday of last week. I do believe that there was a couple of corrections to the Tuesday draft that staff really did not get the chance to review, but I believe that they removed some language that staff had wished that it hoped to be removed, so that's a good thing. Otherwise, staff had seen a draft a week or so prior, and it does appear that there has been effort to meet some of the comments that staff had put together on the water supply, sanitary sewer, and specifically the park and recreation section of the public facilities element. I would direct you all to invite Chatham Park up to explain their changes and to go through in detail what is in the elements.
Thank you. Who would like to speak for Chatham Park on this element? Chuck Smith, thank you.
I will speak. I don't know that I would like to, but I'm happy to be here. I'll try to. First of all, for a few weeks you've had the essence of this element. There's only 2 paragraphs that have changed that you got a week ago. And that had to do with comments related to the spending, some of the points that were made and how the money could be spent to get credit for spending on improvements. And so it was dealing with the language of when we eliminated park design, building design, landscape planning. So I was trying to take that out of there as credit. That's what was added in the last 2 weeks. Everything else has been in there, that was what was added a week ago. Everything else has been in there for a month. So I would say, I would ask you, what questions do you have since you've had it a month?
They haven't had it for months, so they got it last week.
For those 2 paragraphs.
No.
Yes.
Like the language for the water supply, that's new.
That's what I'm talking about for the last week.
Okay, well, you just pointed out the park facility.
The language that was changed for the water supply and the sanitary sewer was in there 3 weeks ago.
They didn't see that.
All I can say is we turned it in.
Not to them.
And the language, I think, is making reference to reimbursement being part of the development agreement. Is that what you're referring to?
I think that's in there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the first time the board has seen that.
Okay.
Well, we turned it in, I think it's the November 7th. I know it was in there then. That was the revision before the 19th.
Jeff, I think your memo is making reference to those two changes, right? The water
Yes,
and the sewer.
I want to be clear, this board did not receive anything on the 7th.
I'm saying we turned it into the town.
Right, but this board didn't see it. So that's what we're asking.
All I can do is turn it into the town.
But we didn't have a meeting.
Right.
You had a meeting on the 2 weeks ago tomorrow night.
Okay, let's focus on the constructive things here.
Yeah, please.
So the staff recommendation on water supply, which is the first thing in the memo. The staff recommendation is on page 14 of the red line version to take out the last phrase of the second to the last paragraph, which would eliminate the words "with reimbursement to the developer or other person or entity who funds the improvement as provided in the development." So that's what our staff recommends. Is that
Yeah, that was left in there when the language changed and moved to the development agreement. And that's what's in the element, so it still refers to that being within this element, and that makes that, that makes it appropriate. Before it wasn't appropriate because it wasn't referring to the development agreement. Is that fair?
It was referring, it was wide open, it was referring to anyone who made an investment that they get reimbursement. And I think the conversation was about moving that to a development agreement. And so this element now states that reimbursement will be in accordance with the development agreement or other agreements. Therefore, I think that statement is okay because it says, as provided in this element.
What do you think?
I think that's what you were saying, it appears that has been satisfied, right? So it took me a minute to follow that chain as well.
I'd personally be interested to hear, just go down this list of your concerns that you have, Mr. Jones, and to see how these things.
I would ask you to ask Chuck.
Yeah, we can go down each one of them.
Because I have mine in writing there, that's what I told you all, but I believe the applicant should be explaining to you how they changed the element.
So we can go down one by one. And the first
Yeah,
one,
that'd be fine.
we referred to does the first one, the answer I gave on the first one make sense? Because later in the objective 3A is when it changed the 3B and 3A. It talks about will be in accordance with the development agreement required by the master plan between the town and Chatham Park. Reimbursement may be in the form of development fee credits or other type of reimbursement specified in the development agreement. So that was what was changed in that language in response to your request regarding oversight.
so? What's the reason for pushing that down the road?
The way I understand it, and maybe Mr. Eagle can, but that's typically where you deal with these issues.
Where you
development
deal
agreement.
with reimbursement issues.
Right.
Because it just feels like that we just keep moving something down the road and we don't get it. We don't get it fixed in concrete. Are we going to have to negotiate this again when it comes to the development agreement?
Well, I think, as I understand it, you've had the development agreement for
Oh, good Lord.
2 years.
Don't even go there.
I used it as a doorstop in my house. None of us have ever looked at it.
Yeah, well, but that's typically where the issue is dealt with. So that's why I think it was. I'm not sure where the request was. It your request?
Development agreement? Yeah.
Yeah, it was Mr. Pioco's request that
As
we.
one of the elements. knowing that we would get to that point where we would have to decide on who was paying for what and when.
So we are just pushing the decision down the road.
Well, I think we're pushing it down the road insofar as changing town policy. Right now, clearly, we're governed under current town policy. And a development agreement is a way to negotiate and come up with a separate, specific policy for the BDD. Or for any other project, for that matter.
So the second paragraph under water supply objective 2B deals with the model to be incorporated in the town's overall water model, and it would be the town's, our staff is recommending that it be a town-owned water model and not your water model. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, we don't control your water model. I think at this point, you don't have a water model. And I think that's
we
what...
do with hydrostructure, don't we?
Yeah, that's right, I'm sorry. And what we've done is provide information to update that based on projections of our development. So it's we aren't trying to say our water model is the water model. And
I just note that any official decisions will be based off of the town's water model.
Right. And that they would keep theirs, as you said in the memo, for planning purposes, but
Right.
ours would be...
They will always have to give us their water model so we can update our town model.
Yeah, and the last sentence in B, see if this is appropriate, says, as determined by the town, the hydraulic water model provided by Chatham Park may be used in developing the town's own hydraulic model of the town's water distribution system. So I don't think that's saying you're using our model in any other way other than using it to update yours.
And I think the use of the word may in several instances indicates that it's not a shall.
Do you all feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, we just wanted to make publicly noted that the town's water model is the official water model.
All right, that takes us to objective 3.
Well, and let's say something though, because honestly, the fact that their engineers will be providing a water model based on their designs is a valuable thing for the town to possess. So there's a pretty good investment there on their part to help the town understand what characteristics are of that network of pipes and hydrants and valves and all the things that go into a water system. So it's a pretty valuable contribution, creating a water model and sharing it with the town.
They have to do it for development, too, so.
Yeah, but I think, yes, exactly. So the fact of the matter is, it'll be a bigger water model than we're used to seeing on a project basis, right? Yeah.
And to this point, Elizabeth can speak to this. I mean, we've been trying to work together as we've been working on our model and providing it to the town. And I don't think we've resolved everything completely, but at least we're rowing in the same direction. 3A we dealt with the development agreement statement. We'd already talked about that. Yep.
Oh, yes, okay.
Then 4A, the reason the language in there is, the question is who other than the town will be a water provider? We have no idea if someday the county may take on the entire water system for the county. All we did was put language in there that allowed those sorts of things to happen. It doesn't say that they are going to happen. We're trying to make them happen or anything like that. But just acknowledging the fact that it could be some methodology like that.
Well, there has been talk of a regional provider, somewhat similar to an Owasso.
So it basically is to cover any future contingency about a provider.
That's all it was trying to do.
So that
with that particular phrase.
That's not dealing with the reused water.
It's just in the water supply section.
Potable water? Not, okay. Because we have contemplated that reuse is going to be coming from the decentralized plan. Yeah. I think reuse does contemplate where it's coming from.
Chuck, I have one question. I'm on a lot of medication, so bear with me now. Objective number 3, go back over that again. You said that went back to number 1.
No, when we talked about the comment that was addressed in that objective 3A when we were referring to the fact that the language had been changed dealing with oversizing and reimbursement to move it to the development agreement, since that's where that sort of conversation typically takes place.
Oh, I see. Okay. I got you. Sorry about that.
Now, I've gone through what you've gone through, and I've had some of my finer moments on drugs.
They're good, aren't they?
Sometimes you need them. And then
we don't do verbatim minutes, do we?
No, not word by word.
The mayor understands.
Yeah.
It's true, I've been there. But I'll take the fifth.
No, I'm clean. I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, then the next thing was the sanitary sewer.
It's the exact same issue in the sewer section.
Being moved to the development.
Right.
So then that brings us down to Parks and Recreation.
Okay, so we move over to page 26. I'm on page 26 of the red line version. So you can see the line item, park design, building design, landscape planning is struck. But the line, let me make sure. Yeah, and Jeff, we talked about this. I'm not sure if this was something that remained without. The issue, as I recall, was making sure that we were providing utilities to the site, and it wasn't clear at that time that it was including water and sewer getting to the site without us asking for reimbursement. We aren't asking for reimbursement.
Yeah.
And so the memo should have been. Yeah. So this is really that line is really talking about water and sewer that has been extended from the road into the site to a building or a water fountain or wherever it's going. And that was, I think, the way I understand it, everyone thought that was appropriate as an improvement. So it remained in there. We did not strike that.
We did get clarification on our last meeting on that item. The difference being improvements to the land versus improvements on land.
Okay, so I think that takes care of those first two comments underneath the italicized paragraph. Is that right? So then the comment that striking and the town. Again, we talked about this. We left it in here because this does not commit you to spend any money at any particular time. You can choose to improve those sites at your own pace. We get 100 years from now and you haven't spent the money on it, you can always say we're doing it next year. But that's, if you, and I think Mr. Fiecco was asking it still to be in there, so that's really up to you.
Chuck, can you, let me know where you are there? I'm following.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm really starting by referring to the town's or the staff's comments. Have you got?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the, I guess the paragraph that begins B. On the town comment where it talks about develop park master plan for each of the 2 larger parks, public park sites, subject to approval by the town, and the funds to be expended by CPI and the town for improvements to those sites. And you were asking that and the town be struck. And so.
And where in the town?
I think this language is all, this language has been changed more so even than striking that, because it's gotten rid of, operational, it now says in addition to, right? Is that the?
Yeah, well, in the middle of the paragraph, it says the town also shall expend $3 million for improvements to each of the 2 sites on such schedule as determined by the town. Was where that concept was still within the paragraph that was originally brought up.
Okay.
And,
I see.
and then, Mr. Fiocco, you correct me if I'm wrong here. We had talked about this before. When we talk about how for these larger sites, we are spending money on 2 of those large. We're spending $3 million each on the 2 larger sites.
Right.
And the concept is that we, without it being part of an improvement cost that we would try to get credit for,
Right.
we would provide a park master plan.
Right.
Together with detailed design plans for the improvements that would cover that $3 million of the expense. So what, if you can envision this, you would get a master plan for the whole park, and then that'll go beyond spending $3 million. We would, within that, identify, okay, of this entire plan, we're going to build this portion of it. This is phase 1. You can choose to disagree with the remaining phase in terms of what amenities are there. You can change them, build them at some point in the future, however you want to. I think Mr. Fiocco's concern was that if we left it blank, that you would have to spend the money to pay for developing the rest of the master plan. So by doing this, we're spending Chatham Park money to develop the master plan, and at that point, you get to decide if you agree with that or not. Is that a fair summary?
That is a fair summary, and I just want to add that the language also says subject to town approval. So the town is at the table.
Yeah, we went back and added that in a few places just to be clear that, there's nothing we do without your agreement, the collaboration.
It is a collaborative effort. So I think, again, the town is the beneficiary of some Chatham Park design services.
So your concerns, Mr. Jones, were about requiring the town to commit to a certain amount of money.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And
the
then Commissioner
language
Bonnet.
doesn't do it. Doesn't commit the town, it's just.
Okay. And then
Just words
Commissioner
on
Bonnet
paper.
had that concern also.
It's just, it's a show of support of parks, that the town would and should fund parks. And that's what these words.
It sounds pretty like the town shall expend $3 million to each of the 2. It sounds like it's a commitment to $6 million.
Well, we don't spend more than $6 million on the parks.
And honestly, where this came from was part of the Parks and Rec Master Plan. That's, David Barth and Paul Horn are saying, to have a successful system, you're going to have to partner. You're going to have to find partnerships. representing a partnership that putting in $3 million, the town would put in $3 million, we'd have a much better park. So we were leveraging, making a contribution, doubling the money, or another source of funding. But this has been even further refined to talk about spending the money, but not putting any time frame on when it's spent. So we don't have it, we don't spend it. We have it, we spend it.
If you wanted to soften it even more, you could remove shall and put may.
Let's do that.
Ready for the next one?
Are we ready for mini parks?
Yes.
Staff is suggesting that we not accept mini parks.
I don't think that's what the blues are now saying.
I'm saying that you all need to consider each and every time that Chatham Park wishes to dedicate a mini park to the town, that is an integral part of our park system. And I think the language affords us the ability to do that, even when the developer might want us to say yes. Right.
Yeah, I think the time before last we had
There could, I don't think there will be a liability if we accept the park. It would be our park, it would be maintained by the town. We would program that park. All this is in collaboration with the developer. And we would hope that if there's a park identified in their plans early on, that we would be at the table and we would say, yeah, that's something that's integral to our park system. And we're okay with the programming that you all are suggesting, and we might suggest the same. So there's going to be some collaboration that has to happen.
So it's an improvement over when the town would own it, but we weren't the ones that maintained it.
I think there was maybe some miscommunication on that item, where I was under the impression that the town was going to own it and Chatham Park was going to maintain it and program it, and that was certainly a liability for the town moving forward. We should maintain and control our land.
So to be clear, it would be up to the town to decide whether or not to accept a mini park into our system.
Yeah, mini parks or any park, quite honestly. I just think that there'll be more mini parks naturally, and there will be some that we accept and some that we don't.
So these would probably be in small area plans for development.
I hope so, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and even probably more detailed on subdivision plans and site plans. We might see some mini parks in the small area plan. These are so small that we might not find them until the land planners lay out the lots or the site plan. So I would think that many parks that would be more at the site plan and subdivision.
It would be our option.
And that's going to be an option.
Yeah, I'll say a few weeks ago, the language changed, or was improved, I guess, to when we said to be as agreed by CPI in the town. I mean, it wasn't just we hope it works that way. It's got to be an agreement by you before it's accepted as a mini park. And I'm not apologizing for these facilities. I mean, I think, the staff is saying that they recognize that many parks are good additions to a healthy park system in that last sentence. And I think 3 of your 8 parks that you have in your system right now are mini parks. Qualify because they're less than 5 acres in size. That's the only kind of standard we got in there that says this is a mini park. It's less than 5 acres. So I think they're going to be. That doesn't mean you're going to accept every one we propose, but I think that they're going to be wonderful additions to the system.
I have just one comment. I was reading over this, and $2 million for 28 public mini parks.
We're up to.
Okay. Right on. $71,000 a park, that's not gonna go very far, is it?
Well, originally, we weren't gonna spend anything on mini parks, and it was gonna be yours. So, I mean, you're $2 million, to me, you're not $71,000 ahead on each park, you're $2 million ahead in your system.
I'm just saying, what do you get for $71,000 in a mini park? Graded?
You get $2 million.
You ain't going there, are you?
I'm not.
And we can do a 6-1. It's up to.
Well, I'll say that you'll see this in a few weeks because we're going to get more specific in the neighborhood that you've already approved a few hundred lots. We're meeting with staff to just go over the concept of, first of all, where are we proposing to dedicate land? Then we'll get into some of the designs. But the first one, I think is pretty cool myself. You'll get to see it and decide that for yourself. But it's only an acre in size. But as you were indicating, it's an important part of concepts that have already been produced in the open space element that require us to have some of these smaller recreational facilities within neighborhoods and within walking distance to more houses. And so these are the kind of facilities we're talking about. So I think I'm personally excited about what is being shown to me, and I think you'll.
Well, I mean, I think you have an incentive to make something known because it's going to make
Absolutely,
that kind of smart.
you are absolutely right. That's right. Okay, then the next one, I'm sorry, are you ready to move on? Yeah. The next one is further down that page where we changed from 3,000 building one of the spending $500,000 in building one of the 7 parks within the park planning districts, that we would do that for every 1,500 units now instead of 3,000. So that gets those built twice as fast.
And I think there's an important distinction here to be noted about the timing of when this occurs. It's not at the certificate of occupancy for single-family homes and townhomes. It is when those lots are platted and are able to be legally sold. So this gets out ahead of when the land has actually got a home built on it. So it makes the delivery of these even faster. So that's an important distinction.
And platting was an issue that you controlled as opposed to COs as well.
Right.
That's another nuance to that.
Yeah, and the platting also represents when the public improvements are constructed, such as roads, sidewalks, water system, sewer system. Lots don't get platted unless those are in place or they've been bonded and that they are able to be in place by another entity using the developer's money to do that. So it's not waiting on the 1,500th house to be built, it's the 1,500th lot to be created.
Yeah, I think certainly better than 3,000. I think it was even a higher qualifier in earlier versions, so this is getting better. I see that I was concerned that we wouldn't get the last parks until sort of the last units that would be built in CO in Chatham Park, which could be many years in the future. This is reducing that in half, and definitely more. I feel better that we're going to get at least the 7 parks that we have to get for the amount of park acreage on the top of
But speaking on our behalf, we don't want to get out too far in front of it because we may never build 21,000 or 22,000 units. And we don't want to build parks at a pace. If we build 3,000 homes and the economy falls apart, and that's not a business model that that's sustainable for us. So we're trying to balance those two thoughts.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the platted language in here. It's on page 27. Okay, thank you.
So your comments, did you go over some of these things with Paul Horn? Do you feel like his concerns have been addressed through?
Paul was apprised of the changes. He didn't get any comments back to me. He did think they were moving in the right direction. But I can't speak for all as to whether this is exactly what he wants. I think this is moving in the right direction, better versions that we've seen in the past. And I think there's enough qualifiers, enough, and the town has to say yes to that we can continue to massage parks as we go along.
Okay, so there's two more things left, and that is the greenways added the qualifier about 700. COs. This provision would be on page 29. Is that correct? And that has remained the same from the previous draft?
And I don't have any reason why that is, but fine with that.
Okay. So we're back to COs rather than signing?
Well, it should, I don't think that's really the issue. That's a mistake. It should be, we're trying to do a platting on to be consistent on everything. So that should be platted lots instead of COs. With the exact same language that's been used on the Park 1500.
Where is that?
Bottom of page 29.
So it will be 1,500 units?
No, it'll still be 700, but it'll be platted units instead of COs.
Okay.
Dwelling units. Oh, we don't have a CO here.
Last sentence, in the middle of the sentence.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, spelled it out.
So that needs to be platted.
Glad.
And then we've got the public facility zone that we've got our desk. The public works code.
So you're asking what we're doing about public works side?
Is this approved language or is this proposed?
There are two pieces. There's the piece, and I hope I don't confuse things too much, and this is maybe where Mr. Smith can help us a little bit if he's in awares. The piece that you're holding up, Mayor, I received earlier today. It's language that would be proposed regarding the addition of a public works facility at a given point in time. Now, apparently, Mr. Messick received another version later today.
I've got the most current version if you'd like to.
And that is, I think I put it up, I only have one copy at the time that Mr. Messick handed it to me.
So what is the difference?
This is, I'm going to give Mr. Fiogo complete credit for this, because we've gotten much more specific on the exact timing of when the facility would be, where 5 acres would come to you. But originally, the only thing we had in there that it would be provided with the 10,000th unit, the platting of the 10,000th dwelling unit. And then the thought came up, well, what happens if you just stop residential development and it builds out as a non-resident, Apple comes and it becomes all Apple. You'd still have the demands for a public works facility. It's a little different from parks because the residence is what's generating the demand for the parks, but this is a little different because public works would be serving both. So that's when the idea was introduced of tying it both to dwelling units and non-residential square footage, or a combination of the two.
Good Lord, this is worse than the dang stormwater. More points.
Well, when it says that
You
CPI
tend to get right to the point.
when it says CPI will collaborate with the town to identify and reserve, is that legally compelling language? Paul Messick?
Compelling?
Well, I mean, is it, with all due respect to Michael Fioco's drafting here, does it require Chatham Park to set up 5 acres public works, or just collaborate on it?
Now, if you read further, the last sentence in that first paragraph says then that the proposed site would be identified through this collaborative language you're talking about, following the first to occur of these 3. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm sorry, Brian.
No, you're okay.
Now, to be clear, the credit is not this language.
No, this is the concept.
Okay.
The language is out of the brain of Mr. Eagle.
Yeah, the concept of not only dwelling units putting the demand for this facility,
That's
but commercial also.
Right.
Okay.
I like this better than just the 10,000 dwellings. When you stop at 9,999.
Well, under this scenario, with 5,000 dwelling units and 5 million square feet.
Right. And that, I mean, the concept makes sense.
In response to the mayor's question, perhaps it would be better in that first line to say collaborate with the town to identify, and just add and shall reserve.
Thank you, Bob. Can you go over the proposal there in the paragraph at the bottom of page 1? It gives the trigger point, I guess I'd call it, for town approval and how it's to be located? I mean, we're sitting here reading this for the first
Okay,
time.
so again, the concept is that when a small area plan comes in that gets to the threshold where you would meet one of these triggers, or the combination of the triggers, then we would have to, as part of the small area plan process, deal with this issue. And whether it's specifically locating a site, locating an area, working with you, or just how far we drill down, we start dealing with it at the small area plan process. When we get to the point where a site has been actually identified, that's when a 2-month period kicks in where you either confirm that you accept this site or you confirm that you don't want this site. And at that point, what we're saying is we want within, that day that you say, okay, this is the site that we agree to. You've got 5 years at that point to have to do your site planning and get a building permit, or the site goes back to us.
And what's the contingency for if the town does not approve it? Is there another selection?
Yeah, we would have to come to some agreement on a site that you haven't tied up a site. Is kind of what
No,
we're guarding
I understand
against.
that. It's sort of like schools. If the schools need it, they'll get it. But if they don't, they won't.
Right.
And I gather this is the same sort of...
They didn't require this exact same thinking, but...
I don't see anywhere in here that says if we don't approve it, that we'll give it another go. But that's maybe because I'm reading you.
If there's not, I add to what the mayor's saying, if there's not an area located or a building permit started within 5 years, site reverts back to Chatham Park with no reservation at all.
That doesn't address what you were saying, if you don't approve the first site, there's no language.
There's no language in the reversion on one.
Not only that, but I was thinking that you, Beth Wilson, felt that it should not be located within a public park site. And of course, there is language here that says, as is agreeable with the town and Chatham Park, but
We didn't want to preclude. If you decided that that's what you wanted, that's all it's saying. You don't. It's up to you to decide that that's the appropriate site. If it's not, you won't agree to it, then we go on.
I don't think it needs to be stated right off the get-go that it's...
I don't think you know it's not yet.
Yeah, but it's, we don't want the points to be, that we get for parks to be used for something like this. I don't want, we made that really clear at the last couple of meetings, and I don't want this to be thrown around.
You have control over accepting this. That should protect any fear you have on that. If the board agrees with you on the particular, we're working together to come up with a site.
It's kind of, like I said before, it's kind of like national parks. If you left it for each administration to decide whether to keep national parks, we probably wouldn't have it. So sometimes you have to make a commitment to things like parks.
Until the next one comes along who does want them. So I mean,
Exactly, but once they're gone, they're gone. So that would be my concern too, to make sure that that's clear that there will not be land designated for public parks will not be among the considerations.
Well, if you guys all agree with that, we strike that, but all we're trying to do is retain, just like some of the other language about the water system being taken over by, we don't see that happening, but it could.
And I personally don't mind if it's public facilities, as long as you have the easy, roads are good to it, you don't have to use your prime piece of land for something like this. This could be land that might not be useful for something else, as long as there's good roads and access to it.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to see public park putting this place in public park. So if we can include some language along that line, that would be great. I think the board would agree.
Well, tell me the board's in agreement before I strike it.
Get something straight. So this public works site is the 5 acres is taken away from park land.
There was discussion while you were gone that there was language that said it was unclear about public facilities on parks, whether that was just for lawnmowers that are related to that park or whether something like this could be put on the park. But I think I certainly have a strong feeling that our park designation should not be used for garages or snowplows. So, just want to make sure that's not something that they present to us, but something that's already designated as park space. But it doesn't seem like you would, but just to be
So does this language say that the public works site would...
Should be.
It may be located on a public park.
But would it come out of the public park acreage as far as the 1640 or whatever the number of acres that we're talking about?
From the way it reads, it appears that it would.
Can we take I think two of you seem to feel that it needs not to be in a public park site.
I don't really have a problem. I've been down to Wilson, and they have one of the finest baseball facilities in the state, and they have a small facility off to the side.
And we're not talking about the small facilities for things like kayaks or lawnmowers and that kind of thing. We're talking about the big 10-acre garage where you store snow plows and equipment. It would be like a big 10-acre site. We're saying that should not be used. There's going to be parkland designated based on houses, but we don't want to use up the land that would be designated for parks to build a big garage for trucks and equipment and things like that. We're not talking about the little small facilities that are related to the parks. I don't have a problem with there being a small storage for something that's related to that particular park, but we're talking about the big 10-acre garage for storage for like what we have now under your Chandler Park.
It wouldn't be 10 acres because there's some real designated size. But
should not, because if you use the garage for that, then that's 5 acres of parkland that you would.
Madam Mayor, why don't you just eliminate the problem for the time being, because it's going to be a while before there's 10,000 dwelling units here. Why don't you just say in that last paragraph on that first page, just say the proposed public works site may be located at such location agreeable to the town and CPI.
And eliminate that it's in a public park site.
And you're right, that doesn't preclude if you guys decide that it should go in a public park, it still can do that.
And did Ken Eagle have something concrete that he was...
I wanted to beat him to the punch.
Oh.
Fine.
Yeah,
Good suggestion.
I personally think the language should be stronger.
What I've done is strike the words within a public park site or.
And replace the word "in" with the word "at." Makes it read a little better.
Okay.
Site at. Or "in," you want, which you want, which do you want? I don't care.
We taught you about it.
I didn't go to Duke. Which one? Which site? Which word do you like?
On.
In or out.
You want to use the word on?
I don't care.
Just leave in.
Shouldn't we get rid of the word other?
Yes, we should get out of it.
Okay.
Go to other two.
Okay, got it.
And can we insert some language that talks about what happens if the 5-acre
Are you listening?
work site location?
This location.
It really is sort of superfluous, because if you agree to it in the first instance, you presumably are going to accept it in the second. If it's not agreeable to you in the first instance, why would that issue ever come up?
Okay, well, okay, you're right.
Correct.
We said that about saying it earlier.
Are we drafting?
No?
Oh,
Was that supposed to be?
no, I...
Now, we've
I was-
just making sure we've got the same notes.
Okay. Well, I think some of us want to see something a little bit stronger. How can we make this a little bit stronger?
Well, we don't want to do this in the first place, so this is what we're offering. It's what my response to you. This is not something, I mean, this is, we don't really feel like we should have to be doing this, number one. Number two, we feel like it could be in a park site. We're agreeing to strike that language, so I think we've put out there what we think is fair.
Okay, well, when
I don't know what you have in mind, but if you would express what that is, we could think about it.
when the residents of Chatham Park complain because the public works site is so far away that they can't get things done at the right time, I expect future boards will probably be very glad that we had that.
Well, I understand.
And quite frankly, and I thank you all for agreeing to provide those 5 acres. So, I'm still struggling over that last paragraph just a little bit. Can you help me identify what?
Sounds like we're just hearing these words run around, I think I'd like to see it for something that's very important to me. Can you read this sentence again about public parks?
The proposed public works site may be located in such location agreeable to the town and CBI.
Can we add not to include a designated park space?
That would be the determination of the board.
But that's my point. I don't want it to be up to a future board. I want it to be determined now that parkland is protected.
I don't think you can restrict the future board.
But you can put it in there and then they can change it.
Well, how does the government do Chatham? We do that with parks now. We don't. We do that with national parks. We can't do that on the local level.
I agree with Mr. Messick. I think you can't constrain a future board, but
I'm asking Mr.
you don't have to listen to my opinion. I just happen to agree with Mr. Messick. That's a lot different from a national park.
Not so different, really. We're
Well, I
requiring-
suppose
You know what, I'm
the
sorry.
Congress could change the designation of a national park.
We have an agreement to set aside land for parks. That's an agreement that we're doing with you all.
And we're going to do
And
that.
we're saying, what I want to say is that you can't double dip on the parks. You can't say, all right, we're going to take up the parkland that we've agreed to. We're going to call this garage a park. No, I don't think that should be allowed.
We, Chatham Park, cannot do that, number one. And
Okay.
first and
I
foremost,
know that.
we cannot do that.
Please talk to me.
Kim,
Ms. Paulette,
we can-
we cannot.
I don't like
It-
to talk to you.
Let's bring
I'm
the
sorry,
dialogue
but
down.
we've tried to say this 5 times.
Stop.
I don't know how else to put it.
You can put it kindly.
Okay. The board has to make that decision.
We can add the language that and you helped me with this, but as the sentence was just read, that says and would not be in a town of Pittsburgh park site.
Thank you, because that-
I don't know
that
the
something else.
artful way of saying that, but we can do that. So,
We just
yeah.
can write a sentence that says that, if that
No.
satisfies you.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. And so, I don't know if you have any suggestions on exactly how that would read.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but, just don't.
How about if it says the proposed public work site shall not be located in a public park site?
As a separate sentence?
Would you like to consider
Instead
unless
of
the
the
town
first-
otherwise agrees?
Oh, you don't even,
Put this in place of that first sentence, in that paragraph. The proposed public work site shall not be located in a public park site. It already says in the very first paragraph that it's going to be a location mutually agreed.
But this is easy enough to add this sentence to add extra protection. Because we've had this discussion numerous times and yet it's coming back. But it makes me feel a little more.
Well, I think that's it's strong because it starts the paragraph off with it. And then we would go to the language that says, and shall be, and its location shall be agreeable to the town and CPI.
That's already in the first paragraph.
Right.
The very first paragraph, the first sentence, it's already there.
Right.
So this,
Okay.
unless you just want it repeated, we could just substitute the proposed public work site shall not be located in a public park site for the first sentence that's in that paragraph now. That's the last paragraph on that page.
okay, I don't know if we've gotten to your point.
Mine?
You were saying there was something else, but we don't know what that is.
And I think it occurs at the point, and this is what I'm hearing, but that doesn't mean it's right, but we're at the point where you've got 60 days to either confirm or not confirm. You're asking what happens if you don't confirm. Mr. Messick gave his opinion that you wouldn't have gotten to this point if you were going to confirm, but at the same time, if you don't confirm acceptance of that proposed site, does this go back to the starting point, or what are you?
Yeah, if we don't confirm within the 60 days, do we just give up on there being a 5-acre public works site, or do we go back to the drawing board and continue to collaborate as it shows in the first paragraph?
This is a...
Is this a one-shot?
Yes.
One shot only?
The way it's proposed, yes, because if you keep rejecting, if you can't agree on a site, we keep trying to find a site, and we get to the end of Chatham Park, and there's no site to give, then
I
there's
just
no
want to
site
make
to
sure
give.
I just want to make sure I understand that. So what we're saying here is, if we already know it's not going to be in a public park, and we already know it has to be agreed upon by the future board and CPI, and if that's not done, and we don't approve, and the board does not follow through on the 60-day thing, then they're out of luck. There's no public work site. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Let me add this, I think, qualifier.
Yeah.
So it says that CPI and the town are going to collaborate to identify the park, or the Sorry.
Oh, Lord. There we go again. Don't go there.
Yeah, right. To identify the site. Okay, so we're going to go through a process to identify the site.
Right.
Within 60 days of identifying that site, we're going to agree that that's the site we want.
It sounds like you did it when the 60 days started.
You know, once we identify it, until we identify it, 60 days doesn't start. Until we agree that that is the site we've identified that we want, 60 days doesn't start.
Okay, so we can agree, we can collaborate, we can agree, and we can reserve. But until we approve, that's when the 60 days starts. Is that right?
I think once we have done those three things, we will have identified the site.
And we've used all the verbs we can.
Oh, come on.
Have a little levity
That's
here.
good. That's good.
All right.
So I just had just a question about payment in lieu. Because we talked before about,
Are we done with? Are we done with this?
I wasn't done with it.
Oh, okay,
About
sorry.
5 years, but nobody else said anything about it, but I guess we are done.
No, it's fine. I just thought we were sorry for it.
No, I think nobody else had any objection other than me.
I wonder your objection.
Because it would automatically be no public facility site if we don't have one, if we have a public facility permit for construction with that site. Then we give up the opportunity to have a public site.
You think it should be longer, or you think it should not be, contingent at all or something?
I don't think it should be contingent. If it is contingent, longer than 5 years. But I think I'm going to feel that way.
Well, it has to be starting. And I can see at Chatham Park, you know, that if we don't use it, they're going to want to use it for something else. I can understand.
Well, and I think by the time there is the achievement of 10,000 points, i.e. 5,000 dwelling units, 5 million square feet, or 10 million square feet, 0 dwelling units in combination, I think from what we've heard from Mr. Grusbeck, we're going to need that site and we will be wanting to build. So I think 5 years is probably a decent buffer. I think it's a decent buffer.
That's about how long we've been working on these elements, isn't it?
So,
Madam Mayor, can I, just to be clear, can I make sure I've got all the revisions to this?
yes, sir.
I have two. One is to add the word shall on the first line between and reserve.
Correct.
And the second is to substitute what I'm going to read for the first sentence in the last paragraph on the first page. The proposed public work site shall not be located in a public park site.
Yes. Okay. Now, you had a question about.
I just wanted to make sure, we had a discussion about payment in lieu, about if there is a payment in lieu, that the money should be used for parkland elsewhere or some kind of, and I just want to see if that's stated in here something.
We're on page 30 of the red line draft. And the first thing I would say about it is that it says CPI may propose a payment in lieu for part or all of the parkland otherwise required for Chatham Park by the master plan and this element. Now, I think that or all needs to be removed.
Read the second sentence if you would.
The town board shall determine whether to accept the offer of a payment in lieu of parkland upon consideration of follow. Yeah, I see that the board approval is still in there, but I can't think of a single circumstance under which all of the parkland required would.
In a particular phase is what I think it's getting at, not all of Chatham Park.
Oh.
Well, I mean, it doesn't say that, but we could make that clear. if that's-
I don't have a problem with striking or
But
all.
we can strike or all if that's really the essence of your concern.
Thank you, it is a concern.
Just oral.
Or all. But that doesn't answer your question.
Yeah, my question was, any payment that is, a payment in lieu, it sounded like it was the will of the board, and we talked about this before, that the money that was paid, payment in lieu in this particular category, would then be put back into a park in another part of Chatham Park, or be used for something else that's related to the park, for recreation or greenway or open space. To me, it doesn't seem like it says that in here.
Well, the last paragraph of this section, which is on page 31,
Can we miss it?
first sentence, addresses what you're
Okay,
talking
good. I missed that. Okay, good.
And that, Mr. Messick can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that accords with the state statute requirements as to where payment in lieu money is supposed to be spent.
I missed that, but thank you.
Yeah, I think we had a conversation last time where I was suggesting strike the whole sentence because statute ruled, and I think you were successful in persuading us to keep it in.
We can't take parks or parks. Okay, thank you.
So just also to be clear, this sheet on the public works site is going to be inserted in section 7, which is on page 31, under town administrative services. This will just be added to that section. Seemed to be the most appropriate place to put it since we were talking about town services.
So it'll end up at the bottom of page 31, or top.
Whatever the page ends up being after all this is put in there, yes. But yes, that's where it would go in.
I do appreciate you adding the public facility, public works site there.
About Mr. Bonnet.
I'd like to say something too, Chuck. I don't know if everybody got his email. I did get it late this afternoon, and pretty much everything that we have just went over, he had comments on, and I think he's going to be pleased with it.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Okay, yeah, we haven't seen that,
We have not.
but thanks for letting us know that. We rarely share a brain.
Well, no, I would respectfully, the very last paragraph in Mr. Bonds' email says, "I'm categorically opposed to payment in lieu," and this section should be deleted in its entirety.
It's in the master plan.
We do not need payment in lieu, we need land for recreation and parks. And this section creates massive opportunity to do otherwise.
As long as the piece is in there that, to me, it says it does need to go back into parks, then it is going to be used somewhere. Maybe it'll go towards making the park bigger or
And I know this may not be what you want to hear, but I'm going to say it anyway. A board 10 years from now that you may or may not be on may decide that it would make more sense for the town to have a payment in lieu for a specific project that the town wanted to use the money for than to have the land where it already has more land than it really wants for parks at that time. That is a possibility. That's one reason you have payment in lieu, so boards can make that determination. And since it is up to the board whether to accept the payment in lieu or not, you have complete control over that.
The county prefers payments in lieu of rather than dedication of land, because they would like to have regional parks, and that's how you fund the regional park.
Yeah, and I think just by virtue of our geography, it's a little bit different.
So I think we had one change to
Yeah, to the text.
to this.
Well, I think we just did another one a minute ago. Or is that the one you're talking
The
about?
one I'm thinking about is substituting platted instead of COs.
Okay, for the greenways?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the greenways because I wanted to ask a question about that. That's fine to make that change, we can make that, but I would also ask that we, since we're changing that concept, I would ask that we be allowed to add this sentence. Financial security for completion of greenway improvements may be provided in the same manner as for construction of streets. And the reason I say that is we're going to go with platted. You know, you have a system to allow financial security to be provided in order to plat prior to 100% completion of construction of water, sewer, streets. And we would like, since if we're going to change greenways to platted instead of COs, we'd ask that we be given that same consideration for the greenways.
Essentially, that would be converting the time frame on which it's required to be constructed from 700 COs to the creation of 700 lots.
Yeah, big same platting,
Yep.
dwelling units, condos, apartments, the same language that applies
To the roads and the sidewalks and the water system and the sewer system.
well, to the part, yes, I mean, the platting of it would be, we can talk about dwelling units and condos like we did in the parks to define what platting means. Same language for what platting means, but I'm just asking that we, be allowed to post financial security if we wanted to go ahead and get a plat recorded prior to the actual completion. You'd have to, I believe your your ordinance right now says you have to have 40% completed before you can post the financial security to get the plat recorded. This would just, you would still have the money for completion of the improvement. We would just might be able to plat, actually record the plat like we would for street construction or water and sewer line construction. So it'd all be treated the same.
I think I would be fine with that. Jeff, do you
I think,
see that outside?
I think in the future we're going to look at that, or modify that 40%.
Well, it may go higher.
So he's not talking about adding a percentage?
I'm not saying that use percentage.
So if we go to 100%.
Well, then, yeah.
If you go to 100, you go to 100.
Right.
I mean, whatever it is.
Right.
Okay.
No, it's a valuable tool, I think, in the development community to be able to do that bonding.
It is. Sometimes being able to sell a few lots is very helpful.
And the 40% is only a minimum, you don't have to go along with that. You
No, the
can
board
go
still
along.
still has to agree to accept the financial security. So we would ask to add that sentence as well as changing the CO to plat.
Can you say that sentence again?
Financial security for completion of greenway improvements may be provided in the same manner as for construction of streets.
I would be okay with that.
There's one other area where Mr. Bonus's notes indicate a difference of opinion, and it is with respect to recreational impact fee exemptions. Not sure which section of what page that would be on.
29.
He says he was opposed to the language exempting CPI from the recreational impact fee. It's foolish to throw away a financial tool so few municipalities are privileged to consider. However, if the board majority decides to grant this to CPI, the board must understand that the current language is way too sweeping in its impact. And he asks us to think about the needs of town-wide parks, recreational finance mechanisms to refurbish parks throughout the town, and the residents of Chatham Park could not be charged. So the that is, I agree that there are several things that he brought forward in this email that have been addressed, but I think the exemption of the impact fee is one that he has participated in the last 2 meetings, I think.
Well, I will just add that I have provided this board with an analysis based on publicly provided documents by Chatham Park and by town staff. Did a comparison of the value of proposal of the facilities they're providing, including the improvements, versus the impact fee, and it was well over $100 million more going with what we have in this facility for giving any future payments than if we were to remove all these improvements, which would maybe be their proposal, and subject themselves to the impact fees. We're getting a far greater investment in our park system through this means versus the impact fees.
So would this only apply to recreation impact fees? It could still be other...
It says recreation impact only.
Facilities about other things like affordable housing.
It doesn't say that they're not going to be charged school impact fees. And dare I say that we've seen other jurisdictions recently stripped of their impact fee legislation, and it's not a certainty, whereas this document is certain. This is a better use.
And then lastly, I would simply comment that we have made it sort of an informal policy of this board not to address issues when we were missing one of our people, when we were missing you, we felt strongly about holding something open. And I just throw that out as noting that the board has in the past felt that a missing member, especially one who's taken an active role, might be I don't know if the board wants to take that into consideration.
Well, I have taken that into consideration, and I am prepared to move forward this evening. I know there have been meetings that I have missed when votes have been taken. I think that's why a board has a quorum, so that it can continue to function without all its members. And I think we've been working on this for so long. We've ironed it out, I think, this evening, that I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Jay Farrell.
Make a motion to approve with these amendments.
Yes. Yes.
And regarding anything that, like I said, I read Commissioner Bonnet's comments, and I thoroughly think we have answered just about everything that he had in his email. Real pleased, and thank Chatham Park for the 5 acres. That was one of his big comments, and I really feel comfortable with this vote.
Did he ask that the vote be postponed, or did he feel that his comments were in lieu of him being here? I did not get the email.
Didn't come out till today.
Nobody voted at 2 o'clock your morning?
2 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah, I noticed the timestamp when it was 2 o'clock.
I didn't get it.
And he doesn't ask us to, he does not, I don't see anything here. He does say he was pleased to hear about the agreement for the land for the future Public Works Garage, parentheses, not on parkland, close parentheses. However, he did not see any language regarding the facility or the process for locating or transferring the land to the town. this language is needed before I can support approval of this element. So I guess problematic is there language enough in there for the transfer of the public of the
I believe.
I think so. If the town has to get a building permit, it has to own the land to get one building, so does it not? Okay, I think that's covered.
It seems to me that there's language in here that would require the transfer of the property to the town.
I'm sorry. We do have a motion on the floor. A motion by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Jay Farrell, to approve this element with the changes that we have spoken of tonight. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Oh,
Thank you very much.
that puts us in the position of additional updates and reports that the commissioners confirmed. We know that we have, Brian Brisbeck has given us a copy of the handout that was given to us by Waste Industries about the fact that China is changing their policies about recycling. And so that's just for your information. Jay Farrell, do you have commissioner concerns?
No, ma'am, I just like to reiterate the handrails. Already see them being used on Main Street.
I'll go back to the trees, Brian. I noticed one of the courts, we've got one tree that's not like, it was, I don't know if it was cut or just separated from the plug.
It's the little thing.
Speaking of little things, I want to hear the great stories.
The what?
The great story, the renewal of the great.
Oh, I think it's just when it sounded, somebody lost their keys and called in, and they were able to get a hold of somebody and fish them off. Stuff like that happens all the time. I know that if Percy's not here, I know the police department used to probably extend themselves in a lot of similar situations.
Well, and they did so with respect to the pig, I believe, this week. And if you have not read the chat list or Facebook, there was a errant black pig about town, not far from your residence.
That's normal.
Yes. And there was some concern about residents on Lindsay Street about the fact that this pig was black and at night could cause a traffic hazard. And running into a black pig at night would do damage to both the pig and the car. So various neighbors reported that, and I believe that Officer ODDO has secured the pig. And so we can all rest easy tonight, knowing that Norman is back home.
He's home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually,
I'll go check on it.
I'll refresh your memory. We're having barbecue special tomorrow.
Well, I did tell a couple of the people who complained about Norman that the town of Pittsboro does have an ordinance that prevents the keeping of hoofed animals in the town limits. And that therefore, last time I checked, pigs have hooves. But then I did let it be known that for many years, and I know that you know this, Jay Farrell, there was a cow kept in the town limits by Fred Noe. And Fred served in a number of capacities, if not on this board. And you know what? Nobody ever complained about that cow.
I think we got grandfathered in or something.
So, anyway. Yeah, well,
have anything.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please rise.